In Nairobi's vibrant cacophony, where the heat competes with matatu conductors for sheer persistence and the aroma of street food battles the exhaust fumes for dominance, Mwikali's oasis of calm was her parking spot. Not just any patch of gravel, but a designated slice of heaven amidst the urban sprawl, reserved for her and Betsy, her trusty vehicle that had seen better days but still shone like a beacon of reliability. This parking spot was Mwikali's claim in a city that never paused, a city where space was as coveted as the last chapati at a family gathering. It was her foothold in the daily scramble, a piece of Nairobi she could call her own, where Betsy could rest without fear of being nudged, bumped, or, heaven forbid, towed by an overzealous canjo worker. But this wasn't just about convenience, it was a matter of principle, a stand against the chaos. In a world where matatus flouted the laws of physics to squeeze into spaces that defied dimensions, and pedestrians navigated the sidewalks with the agility of seasoned acrobats, Mwikali's parking spot was a beacon of order. It was her small victory over the entropy that ruled the streets, a square of sanity where she could begin and end her day with a semblance of control. To Mwikali, losing this spot would be akin to losing a piece of her soul, a blow to the very essence of her daily routine. It was where Betsy could bask in the glory of being the only car not covered in the dust of negotiation and compromise that settled over the city like a fine mist. This spot was more than just convenience, it was a statement, a declaration that amidst the honking, the shouting, and the relentless hustle, here stood Mwikali, unyielding, a steadfast sentinel of her own peace of mind. And so, in the heart of Nairobi, amidst the symphony of organized chaos, Mwikali and her parking spot stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of those who seek to carve out a space of their own, a reminder that even in the wildest of jungles, there can be a place to call home, if only for Betsy and her. Juma, the notorious parking pirate of Nairobi, saw the apartment complex's parking lot as his personal playground. With the swagger of a matatu driver navigating rush-hour traffic, Juma commandeered spots with a brazenness that left neighbors muttering under their breath. But it was Mwikali's designated haven that drew his attention most, a spot he invaded with the frequency of a recurring soap opera villain. His vehicle, a monstrous SUV that had seen more fuel stations than the open road, was less a mode of transport and more a statement piece. A statement, perhaps, of his utter disregard for communal harmony and unspoken parking etiquette. This hulking beast of metal, which consumed petrol as if preparing for hibernation, had the audacity to plant itself in Mwikali's spot with a smugness that could only be rivaled by a cat that had just commandeered the warmest spot on the couch. Each morning, as the sun rose over the Nairobi skyline, casting long shadows in the promise of yet another sweltering day, Mwikali was greeted not by the sight of Betsy basking in her rightful place but by Juma's SUV, lounging lazily like a king on a throne that was not his. It was as if the vehicle itself sneered at her, its shiny exterior reflecting her indignation back at her, a metallic embodiment of Juma's maddening audacity. Neighbors whispered tales of Juma's parking conquests, sharing stories of his territorial expansions with a mix of disbelief and grudging admiration. It was rumored that even the stray cats had learned to steer clear of Mwikali's spot, lest they find themselves boxed in by the automotive behemoth that claimed territory with the entitlement of a colonial-era explorer. In the grand narrative of the parking lot's daily dramas, Juma was the self-appointed protagonist, a role he played with oblivious gusto. His casual hijacking of Mwikali's spot became the stuff of local legend, a saga recounted with a shake of the head and a chuckle over cups of chai. As for Mwikali, she found herself cast as the beleaguered heroine, plotting her next move in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where the prize was not cheese, but the much-coveted asphalt square that was her parking spot. Mwikali, in her quest for parking justice, embarked on a campaign of diplomacy that would make the United Nations proud. With the patience of a saint and the optimism of a lottery player, she penned note after note, each a masterpiece of politeness and restraint. These handwritten missives, left under Juma's windshield wipers like peace offerings, were crafted with the kind of care usually reserved for love letters or ransom notes. Dear Juma, I hope this note finds you well. It appears there has been a tiny mix-up with our parking spots. Would you be so kind as to park in your designated area? Many thanks and warm regards, Mwikali. Yet, for all the sweetness dripping from her words, Mwikali might as well have been writing in invisible ink. Juma, whose relationship with subtlety was as distant as a snowball's chance in the Sahara, seemed utterly unfazed. The notes, those delicate paper doves of diplomacy, were met with the same regard as a flyer for a lost pet, noted, but quickly forgotten. They became but fleeting decorations for his dashboard, their messages of communal respect whisked away by the Nairobi breeze as if they were nothing more than dandelion seeds. As the notes accumulated, each unheeded, Mwikali's frustration grew. The parking spot saga was evolving from a minor inconvenience into a full-blown turf war, with Juma blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the confines of his SUV. The situation was akin to a game of chess where one player was strategizing moves in advance, while the other was unaware they were even playing. Mwikali's gentle nudges of civility were lost on Juma, a man seemingly inoculated against the common courtesies of apartment living. It was a battle of wits against witlessness, and for a while, it seemed as though witlessness was winning. But Mwikali, undeterred, realized that if her words were to have any impact, they would need to be accompanied by actions louder than the collective groans of commuters in Nairobi's rush-hour traffic. It was time for a new strategy, one that would finally make Juma sit up and take notice. The stage was set for Mwikali to escalate her campaign from gentle reminders to a masterclass in parking lot politics, proving that when it comes to reclaiming one's territory, sometimes, actions speak louder than notes. Mwikali, having exhausted the arsenal of polite diplomacy to no avail, decided it was time to switch tactics. If Juma was the immovable object, she would become the unstoppable force, albeit armed with creativity rather than brute strength. She embarked on a mission that would require all her wit, a bit of audacity, and a flair for the theatrical. Her first act of ingenious rebellion involved recruiting the neighborhood kids, offering them a bounty of sweets to play an elaborate game of guard the spot. The children, with the enthusiasm only sugar promises can inspire, took to the task with zeal. They chalked the outline of Mwikali's car on the tarmac and stood sentinel, warding off any potential invaders with a barrage of chants: "This spot is taken, go away, or face the wrath of Mwikali's brigade." Juma, upon encountering this pint-sized picket line, could only scratch his head in confusion, retreating in the face of their sugary resolve. But Mwikali's piece de resistance was yet to come. Drawing from Nairobi's rich tapestry of street performances, she enlisted the help of a local theater group, promising them fame and an audience for their experimental play. The parking spot became a stage, the drama unfolding with every attempt Juma made to reclaim it. One day, he found a mime artist, trapped in an invisible box right where he intended to park. The next, a Shakespearean actor delivered soliloquies from Romeo and Juliet, proclaiming his undying love for the asphalt beneath his feet. Juma, faced with this barrage of creative resistance, found himself at a loss. Each day brought a new surprise, turning his parking routine into a guessing game of what will Mwikali think of next. The neighbors watched with bated breath, their daily lives now enriched by this ongoing saga of parking spot politics. Mwikali's masterstroke of parking lot diplomacy was so brilliantly conceived it could have been the plot of a blockbuster comedy. With her cousin Muchua, an actor whose talent for drama was only rivaled by his inability to land a leading role, they planned an operation that would make Mission Impossible look like a walk in the park. Muchua was to be the chameleon of the concrete jungle, a master of disguise whose performances would bewilder Juma and reclaim the parking spot from Mwikali. Each day brought a new performance, turning the parking lot into the hottest ticket in town. Neighbors began to look forward to Juma's arrival, popcorn in hand, eager to see what scene would unfold. Juma, for his part, became increasingly wary, approaching his former spot with the trepidation of a man walking into a trap. For the grand finale, Muchua morphed into a character so compelling, so divinely inspired, that the heavens themselves must have paused to listen. Donning a robe that made him look more like a budget Gandalf than a man of the cloth, he transformed the contentious parking spot into his very own pulpit, a sacred ground from which to preach the gospel according to parking etiquette. With a booming voice that could rouse even the most apathetic of Nairobi's residents, Muchua began his sermon. "Brethren," he bellowed, drawing an eclectic congregation ranging from curious neighbors to stray cats, all united in their anticipation of the spectacle. Today, we gather not to condemn, but to enlighten. For in the holy book of community living, it is written, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's parking spot." As Muchua's sermon gathered steam, so did the crowd, their numbers swelling until they spilled onto the street, effectively barricading the entrance to the parking lot. He spoke of the 7 deadly sins of parking, with a particular emphasis on gluttony, taking more space than one is due, and wrath, the fury invoked in the hearts of the deprived. The air was electric with conviction, the assembled crowd hanging on his every word, nodding along to his rhythmic cadences like a gospel choir in full swing. Juma, arriving to witness this holy blockade, found himself at a loss. There was no getting through the mass of bodies that had formed a human shield around Muchua's makeshift pulpit. He was forced to park a biblical distance away, trekking back to his apartment as Muchua's words echoed in his ears, a sermon that managed to be both a public spectacle and a private epiphany. Juma's pride, once as inflated as a politician's ego, deflated quicker than a punctured tire. The realization that his parking spot antics had become the estate's favorite comedy was a bitter pill to swallow, harder even than finding alternative parking in Nairobi's cramped spaces. The spectacle of his downfall was too much. The man who once ruled the parking lot with an iron fist and an indiscriminate key fob, now found himself longing for invisibility, or at least a less theatrical set of neighbors. In the end, Mwikali's cunning tactics paid off. Juma, weary of battling wits with the indomitable Mwikali and perhaps a little impressed by her ingenuity, conceded defeat. He began parking in his own designated spot, leaving Mwikali's reclaimed territory free for Betsy once more. Juma's surrender was as dramatic as the final scene of a telenovela, minus the dramatic background music and the wind machine for dramatic hair effects. After weeks of battling wits and wills, he approached Mwikali, his demeanor that of a man who had just realized his invincibility cloak was, in fact, a mere bath towel. His walk of shame was not across a plank but through the very parking lot that had become the stage of his downfall. "Hey, Mwikali," Juma started, the words sticking in his throat like a chunk of ugali swallowed too hastily. His sheepish grin was so out of character that Mwikali half expected a choir of angels to descend or, at the very least, a soft rain to start, as befits such reconciliatory scenes in Nairobi. I've been thinking," Juma continued, scratching the back of his head as if hoping to unearth the right words from his scalp. "Maybe, just maybe, parking in your spot wasn't the, gentlemanly thing to do." Mwikali listened, her arms folded, her expression a mix of amusement and curiosity. It was the moment of truth, the climax after weeks of drama, comedy, and parking lot politics. She watched as Juma, the once proud conqueror of parking spaces, now stood before her, offering peace with the earnestness of a repentant politician. "I promise, from now on, to respect the, sacred geometry of designated parking. Your spot will remain your spot," Juma declared, his words carrying the weight of a solemn vow, the kind usually reserved for New Year's resolutions or promises to start dieting, tomorrow. Mwikali, ever the gracious victor, accepted his apology with a smile that said, "I knew this day would come." She extended her hand, and Juma shook it, the gesture sealing their newfound truce, a handshake more significant than any treaty signing. As Juma walked away, his shoulders a little less broad, his step a little less confident, Mwikali couldn't help but chuckle. The parking saga had ended not with a battle, but with a handshake and a sheepish grin. She had won, not through force, but through creativity, persistence, and a little help from a flamboyant cousin with a penchant for drama. The estate buzzed with the news of Juma's capitulation, the story spreading faster than gossip in a WhatsApp group. Neighbors whispered, chuckled, and nodded in approval. The parking spot, once a battleground, was now a monument to Mwikali's victory, a testament to the power of wit over might. And so, the curtain fell on the parking lot drama, leaving behind a legacy of laughter, a renewed sense of community, and one very important lesson: never underestimate a woman with a designated parking spot and a cousin in the theater. Mwikali had won, not through confrontation, but through creativity and a dash of mischief. Her victory was celebrated not with a parade, but with the quiet satisfaction of parking in her own spot.